That's the cameraman's name. But you're back. Cold Town's back.
Cold Town is back.
Cold Town's back. I'm excited. This wasn't supposed to be like a commemorative episode, but why not start off like with something super positive, like the fact that Austin's favorite improv theater is finally open after a year.
One of Austin's favorite improv.
There's like
theaters.
3, right? There's like the Hideaway,
Hideout,
and then there's
Fallout,
and then Cold Town.
And Cold Town and Institution still exists in our hearts.
And then in your hearts, and then the Violet Crown movie theater is opening. It's just getting back, and it's good.
Yeah.
I'm a little sad that it took so long, but I'm glad that it's
okay. It's okay.
I feel like this would have been a really golden era for like new independent movies to come out, because while Hollywood was taking a break, because of COVID and whatnot, like, you could have really seen some really ballsy producers coming out and making some serious art. And I'm kind of sad that the indie theaters didn't really showcase that, No,
I think so. I don't think we've seen what's gonna come out of the pandemic yet. I think people are writing. I think productions are happening sort of like one place, really interesting, like how much can we film in one house sort of a productions. I think we will see a huge amount of art flood the festivals come this fall and through the next year, because the lifespan of a movie takes so long that I think we're just starting to I think productions are now just ending and getting into, and that's because even my kid's in one of those. Well,
that's cool. Let's just hope that this stuff, like the good stuff, doesn't get censored. And I think that if anything, from an arts perspective, you need Hollywood as a monopoly, and you need some other venues of film production to offset that monopoly, especially considering like the influence of like communist China and all this other shit that's in the movies and in Hollywood and whatnot, right? Like it would probably be a good thing to have like multiple venues where people with like dissenting thoughts can actually produce art, and hopefully that comes about as a result of this.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of things happening on tiny little shoestring budgets. What you have to realize is that a shoestring budget for a movie could still be $50,000 or $60,000. And that's like scrimping. That's going really thin. So I think the thing is getting people to finance and help make art possible.
Yeah. Well, this podcast is also on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
But when it comes to financing too, like, one of the things that was concerning me is that like PayPal and some of these other financial platforms were like not letting certain people who had certain views use the platforms, and that could definitely, granted, you might, really be disgusted with some of those views, but that could create a slippery slope in terms of what becomes allowed and what doesn't become allowed over time. And we have to be very cognizant about not letting that happen.
I agree. I also think that sort of it's 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, right? Is that you can't allow them to create monopolies where they're the only opportunity to do that. If there are multiple companies that do it, then one company can decide we don't want to work with these people, and then someone else will always come along and allow it.
But you look at what happened with Twitter and Parler right after January 6th, and them shutting Parler down because Trump joined Parler is scary. Like it is extremely scary, and then especially when like the Ayatollah is like on Twitter right now talking about like killing Jews, and like not the actual Ayatollah from the 70s, but like his son or a different Ayatollah who's very powerful in Iran is like talking about that, and you got like some of these like Palestinian liberation leaders talking about how we need a new Hitler, and like that shit's being tweeted, and you had a CNN contributor saying something in a very similar vein, and it's like that guy still has a platform, but it's like now you can't have now Parler is not being able to, you can't download or install Parler on any of these servers. Like that is scary. That's very scary.
But I think what has to happen is you have to apply those same rules to everyone with the same standards. So that's where, to me, it's like, I personally am a person that's like, oh no, if I'm the owner of that platform, you're not talking about that shit on my platform. Right?
Sure.
But I then have to apply that to all of the other people that
are on that platform. You have to monitor everybody.
Exactly.
And if you can't do that, you got to let people talk.
Exactly. So it's either create walls for everybody or
even if it's your platform and you have a free speech platform, which is kind of what Twitter and Facebook is, you just the best way to like silence, misinformation is with factual information, right? Or the best way to silence hate is with love, or the best way to silence hate is also with like facts to disprove why that's bullshit. And if you start censoring people, that's the fact, right? But when you start censoring people, you just create more of that hate and you martyr these people, so it strengthens it.
I agree with martyring, strengthening it. The difficulty is that when the first goal, like Trump's first big thing was that he created the terms, alternative facts, and sort of that like creating a space where we don't have to believe in actual facts. So I literally read I was working on a presentation yesterday, and I was reading someone who refused to believe that slaves were brought here on slave ships.
Was that Hotep Jesus? That guy was actually on Joe Rogan, and I saw that.
There's a whole, but I mean, like, okay, if we're going to, there's a whole group of people who refuse to believe the Holocaust exists.
Yeah, that is a little scary. But even with Tauri,
Mm-hmm.
even with the slave stuff, right? Of course, there were slaves that were brought on slave ships, right? But there could be a possibility that a lot of slaves came from like South America, because South America, if you look at like the way Pangea was formed and whatnot, like South America and Africa are literally connected to one another. So there is like a logical possibility that they were bringing in slaves from southern parts of North America.
Absolutely. Anybody that they could pass off as a slave was getting passed off as a slave.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. But I'm saying when you create a system that allows any real thing to not be real, to no longer be a fact, then we can't say facts are facts, because literally there are people that are going to argue whether the sky is blue today.
Yeah, that's true. But that also happened all through COVID. Like all throughout COVID, everyone said like, "Hey, this came." When anybody tried to talk about how this came out of a laboratory, it got debunked as a conspiracy theory, and they said scientists have proven numerous times that this is false. And every time you speak about this coming from a lab, you're spreading disinformation. And now,
this week,
1 year later, it's like, oh, by the way, we're actually seriously considering whether or not this came from a lab. So it's like,
well, that's the other thing, is that facts are only as good as our current technology and what we know right now, right? So I always say that in the context of like, I worked as a marketer for a big company that made a bunch of products. When they made the orange color that went into cheese, they weren't thinking about, like, they did some tests and they were like, oh, everybody's fine. It's not until, and I don't know, don't anybody hold me to orange food coloring. Don't come after me, Kraft. But, now then, after people are exposed to it for 20 years, then we might find out that something's different about it. I don't believe, especially having worked for one of those large food companies, nobody in the lab is like, fuck everybody, we just want to make the money. They're all like, we want to make a really good product that's healthy for people's families. We just don't know what's healthy at that point.
You also don't know what the CEO's thinking. You don't know what the head of the parent company's thinking.
But the CEO is not the person who, in large multinational companies. Now, in small companies, the CEO is very connected to what's happening. But in these large multinational companies, the CEO is not in the lab every day.
But let's back this up now. Now we know that like food coloring and chemicals and like Roundup, which is used in Monsanto, like all that shit, it causes cancer. Like the sugar in diet soda gave people tons of diabetes and all types of mental health problems. And then the sugar industry paid off scientists to say that sugar doesn't
what we didn't know before suddenly became true, and then because of money. So, but now, if you walk down the water aisle in Target, you'll see that all of the sparkling waters, there's almost none that have added sugar. Almost none are marketed now, because the end actual retailer decided, hey, we don't like this. We're not going to have this on shelves. It's not healthy. All of those people made.
But there's still all types of. But then there's still all types of chemicals from the plastics that get into the water. There's still like the fluoride. There's still like the fluoridation that goes in water, which has a whole bunch of negative effects on your development.
But slowly
and whatnot,
that has to be accepted by the. As that's accepted by the scientific community, and that gets pushed over to laws and into the FDA makes choices, which if it's not ours, it gets outlawed in France or some other tiny country. all of those smaller companies and medium-sized companies and even those big companies make decisions on pulling those things out as they learn.
We don't do
more
a very
and more.
good job of educating our children about what's in our food. And we do a really bad job of educating our kids about the financial system.
Absolutely. I agree completely. I have the kids that know they're not allowed a lot of things, and will come and go, Mom, can I have a popsicle from so-and-so's house? It's green. And I'll go, nope. And they'll go, it has food coloring. And I'll go, yep, you can have it. Because they know Mommy does not play about a whole long list of chemicals that they're not allowed to ingest.
Well, that's good that they know that, right? But how many parents are giving their kids garbage? And this is in like, especially like prevalent in like these low income, like lack of a better word, like ghetto schools. Like I used to sub in AISD, and like every time I was like in a Title I school, especially like the younger grades, I saw the shit that these kids had brought with them for lunch.
Yeah.
Right. I saw the shit that these kids had that their moms packed for breakfast, and I'm like, this is trash what you're feeding these people.
Yeah.
And what it's going to do is it's going to like mess with their neurological development. It's going to mess with their endorphins. It's going to screw with their moods. It's going to make them emotionally unstable and irritable. It's going to help promote and foster all these fucking stereotypes that you're going to see later on.
Yeah.
And it's literally going to become an impediment to actually like achieving like wealth, success, happiness, and prosperity. And then, you know, with all this woke bullshit that they're perpetuating, it's all it's going to do is cause this next generation of kids to just blame somebody else for why they're feeling this way, or inherently feel as though they don't possess characteristics of success because of what they look like.
In a lot of ways.
It's dangerous.
In a whole lot of ways. There's so many parts of the system that are fucked.
Yo, have you heard about Lockheed Martin's racial re-education?
No, tell me about it.
Okay, man, I wrote this. I actually took notes on this shit.
Okay, good. Tell me about it.
Hold on.
Seeing as I do diversity and equity.
You love this shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Lockheed Martin is the nation's largest weapons manufacturing company. They sent a bunch of their white male executives to re-education training.
Good.
To learn. Okay, the largest weapons manufacturer learning about re-educate, like racial education. What? So like the next person who bombs the Middle East is going to be a woman of color. Like, you know, it's like that meme. It's like, yo, the next pair of bombs will be sent by a woman.
Yeah.
It's silly. It's just so silly. And then I posted the story, like, and this is one of the clips they talked about. Okay, and this is what they're saying. Hold on. Yo. Okay. Boom. This is from their class, right?
Okay.
Key white male culture characteristics: a survivor mentality that focuses on the future, a tendency to rugged individualism, a can-do attitude, operating from principles and conscience, focus on hard work, action, and task completion, striving towards success and materialism. That, like...
It sounds to me like they were patting some backs and fluffing some feathers.
Yeah, like what is it? Like only white people can do that? Like that's the most racist shit ever. Like all this...
But so... Yes, that's racist, but when you are talking to a group that considers themselves and their lifestyle as the goal.
What do you mean? But like that should be everybody's goal. Why would you not be able to attain that goal of having all that?
That's not what I mean. I'm saying like when you're talking for white men, not you.
Okay.
But as a generalization, if you've always seen yourself as the norm and the goal, and everyone else working toward a lifestyle of what you attain more naturally.
What do you mean?
Then you're sort of like
explain,
you're
you gotta explain that a little bit more though, because like what are the principles that you like? What are the principles and characteristics of being successful
No. I'm not saying in that way. I'm saying like our society, media portrayals, representations, our language, our arts, in a lot of ways, because the people who are financing, the people who are creating historically have been, and the people who have been in the positions of power have created things in their own imagery.
Sure.
So if you're talking to them, and I don't know who taught this, so I can't talk smack about
Okay, but
somebody.
then these same people, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you, but these same people, look at how those same people portray black people in the media.
Absolutely,
okay,
I
so
agree.
It's like the same people that are promoting this critical race theory stuff and this white male diversity training and all this garbage, which it is considering these other factors, right?
I don't consider it garbage. I think you have to I think I would love to see what else they were taught, because to me, that's a little bit of a fluffer.
I'll send you the Twitter thread.
Please do.
The Twitter thread.
To me, that's a little bit of a fluffer of making them feel great. But I think for me, I love critical race theory. I talk about a lot of it a lot. I think you have to be aware that. Okay,
but you don't need to develop an entire educational curriculum to know that racism is bad. Like, you want to talk about you want to talk about something else.
You do for people who don't recognize that it's bad, and you do for.
But everybody
systems.
Recognizes that. It's
no, they
bad.
don't. No, they don't.
I think today's generation definitely today's younger generation.
No. Not all of them.
But so many people do, though. And
but you can't think, Austin is not the norm. We are so abnormal. I grew up in North Georgia.
Okay.
I like to tell people I'm from Atlanta.
Weren't you in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district or that?
Probably further north.
Maybe.
So I grew up 10 minutes from a sundown county, literally a full county that had less than 1% of black people, and you weren't safe after dark, to the point where I had white people tell me I was not safe after dark.
Okay, but when was this? When did you grow up?
In the 90s.
Okay, but things have changed from the 90s till now.
I know educators in those places. It is not, the curriculum is not very far from different. I know what curriculums look like in a lot of places based on family members, and depending on who's teaching it, you also have to recognize, Alex, if we're talking about somewhere with zero population, I can't find a school for my kids to go to that has an integrated staff where literally there aren't even Spanish teachers who are Latinx.
Latinx.
Then who are brown? You can't even.
Who are Hispanic?
We're in Austin, and I can't find a Spanish teacher that's brown in some of these schools.
Well, that's because the education system is garbage. You also have wrestling coaches in AAC that never wrestled.
I agree.
So that is a universal concept. That's universal.
I agree, but for me, sending my children there, I want there to be diversity on the staff as well as in the classroom. And I don't trust that all of these teachers, one, have been educated in a way that especially when they've been educated from a place that that has a white supremacist view.
Like where? Like in North Georgia or something?
Like in all of America, Alex.
But you think it's like but how is this white supremacy though? That's what I'm curious.
White supremacists by putting white people in a place where they are seen as the norm and everyone else is seen as being different from them.
Okay. Then how is our society helping to fix that? What is our society doing to increase the amount of but then why are we not financially investing in giving financial literacy programs in black neighborhoods? Why aren't we doing that?
But that isn't going to happen just because you and I talk about it and no one's educated on it. So you have to have critical race theory.
But how is that
so that people understand what the differences are?
Or you just start teaching financial literacy programs in black neighborhoods, or you know what I mean?
Or you teach it in all of the neighborhoods but
you should specifically do it in those neighborhoods because of the generational wealth disparities that occurred.
Absolutely.
Hundreds of years and whatnot, right?
We also all know the telltale stories of wealthy white kids that don't know what in the shit to do when they inherit a job or get money and don't know what to do with it. So it's like financial literacy needs to exist for so many.
It's universal.
It absolutely should be universal. But my issue going back to it is you can't expect the system to change unless, nobody's going to fund financial literacy in any school, and especially not schools with black and brown kids, when we aren't dealing with what the differences are and the disparities are, and nobody's respecting
has brought this
them.
racial stuff to the forefront on such an intense level that if you're not funding financial literacy programs, then you could really make some strong cases about racism.
You could, if people are willing to listen, and if people refuse, if we still
but
have
I think
so
people
many
are willing
people.
I think people are willing to listen. I think that the problem is that we're doing a bad job of how we're selling it.
You're generalizing that people are. Your assumption is that people are willing to listen. I literally have sales calls about this all the time.
What do you mean sales calls? Okay, explain that.
Because I teach this through the theater, I have people reach out. Then I talk to their CEO, who's like, "We don't have any issues," and then I ask, "Okay, what's the makeup look of your company? What's the diversity dimensions in your company?" And they go, "Oh,
okay, well,
we have an Asian person."
Sure, get that. Okay, but then what about the people that are applying for those jobs? What are the ratios of people applying for those jobs?
Depending on the spaces where they are, or what, there's a lot of reasons why you might not. I have not applied for jobs for a lot of reasons. I've looked at companies' websites and gone, "Wow, Looks like it's a place where I'm definitely not going to feel welcome.
You see, so you
and
don't even
literally
try.
backed out.
So you don't even try though, like that.
But Alex, I'll also tell you that I've literally never been hired for a job in Austin. Never been hired for a job in Austin, and I have applied for at least 100.
Same here. I haven't hired for anything. I've done this. We're in the same boat. I haven't been hired for a job like this is the only job I've ever been good at in my life that I've ever kept for a long period of time. Like we're in the same boat.
Yes, but also I've applied for a lot of jobs that I've been very well qualified for, and I've gotten calls after I took my first name off of my resume when I went from Tarette to Tauri, and then went to T. Laws-Phillips. Suddenly started getting calls.
Well.
When I removed any indication that I was either a woman or that I might be a person of color.
All right. How do you feel about that terminology, though?
A person of color?
It seems like...
because I live in sometimes there's ambiguity. I'm a black woman, but I have... Ethiopian people think I'm Ethiopian. Dominican people think I'm Dominican.
But you don't. You don't think that that's like similar? Not to like I'm not trying to push any buttons, but you don't think that's like similar to calling somebody like a colored person?
No.
Really? But it's like the same
because I
phrase.
think a person of color, I'm a person of color when I'm saying I'm a part of non-white circles. So for me, I'm a person of color is I'm not white. So that for me includes anybody who's brown. That includes all of Asia. That includes everybody who's indigenous. That includes anybody from any derivative of Africa. That includes all the people that aren't European descent.
Okay, I mean, if you're cool with it, I guess.
I don't have a problem
I
with
just
it.
Felt like it's a little bit odd to use that terminology. Like it's almost it's almost like going back to calling somebody.
No, because it's a different group of people. So if
because you're calling yourself okay.
No, but if you're talking about non-white people, then you can say non-white. You can say people of color. You can say BIPOC.
But all these words, it's just like it's silly. It's just like we're all
but
human.
But it's not silly. Your choice is that it's silly because it requires you to do work.
No, not really. It's just a matter of what you want to allocate your work towards, right? That's what I think. I think at the end of the day, I would rather spend my time doing work towards like, financially investing my money or like learning about like the Bitcoin charts or like exercising or working out or like going fishing or doing whatever.
Because race isn't central to your life.
But I'm a Jew. What are you talking about?
Then you're religious.
But I mean, I have a Star of David tattoo on my right shoulder. And then if you want to talk about what's happening right now with those anti-Israel stuff.
I understand that completely too. But it's not central to your life every day, and it isn't what drives you. That is true for you as a Jewish person.
I know you've told me some stories.
But that gets to be true for you.
Right, yeah. But I mean, still, I think the best way to like move past some of those stereotypes and move past a lot of that shit is for people to be provided with like avenues and knowledge to improve themselves in life. Like if I
disagree because I literally I've lived my life as a middle class kid, and my husband and I have done well enough that we've landed in the top 5% of people who make a bunch of money in the country.
But that's good.
But it hasn't changed how I'm treated on the street. It hasn't changed how I've been treated by police. It hasn't changed how I'm treated within the healthcare
how has
systems.
It changed? How do you feel like you're treated? Sorry. How do you feel like you're being treated at Cold Town in your improv circle being what you look like?
That's not my issue. My issue is systemically. So my issues within the healthcare system are constant. I have issues within healthcare that I think absolutely are exacerbated by being a woman and absolutely exacerbated by being a black woman.
Do you want to share if you're comfortable?
I have so many stories.
We'll just say one thing that's, the first thing that comes to mind.
I have been challenged by a doctor on whether I should get tests in an ER. I came in with respiratory distress. I had had pneumonia twice before. I knew that I was developing it again. And I was told, listen, you should just go to your general doctor. People abuse the ER.
But why would your skin color have anything to do with somebody saying that? Like,
you tell me.
I don't know.
Have you ever been denied health care? Because I have multiple occasions.
Did they deny it or did they just try to get you to go somewhere else? They didn't say, like, we're not serving you, did they?
I've been told I was not being served on multiple occasions. I once was told I was not being served, and I said, okay, well, then I'm not signing anything and I'm not going to pay for this. Suddenly it was okay. So I've literally had to fight to see doctors on multiple occasions, including when I was in active labor with my daughter.
Well, all right, explain that.
I was in active labor with my daughter Friday to Sunday. Didn't see a doctor on Saturday. On Sunday, had a doctor say, I don't think you're in active labor. We're going to discharge you and send you home. I said, I disagree. I'd like to see the perinatologist on call. She said, well, it's a holiday. He's not here. I said, I'm really sorry. I'm refusing to go home until I see the perinatologist. She said, I really don't think you're in active labor. I disagreed. I saw the perinatologist by noon and had my child at 4, but via emergency C-section, because he agreed I was in active labor, and if I went home and continued to be in active labor, either me or my child could die.
Well, I'm glad. Okay.
And I've literally had like instances like that on multiple occasions.
Sure. And
I've been told there's nothing wrong with me, go home. At least 3 times in the last 5 years. In ERs in Austin.
And you don't know any white people that have had it happen to? Have any of them ever shared any of their ER stories with you?
Yeah, I have lots of conversations about it.
Okay, I'm just asking because I think it's important to know what's up, right? Like
absolutely, but I have so many family stories. So when you look at the differences there are huge differences in healthcare disparities. If you look at the numbers of the maternal death rate in Texas, we have the worst one. It's significantly worse for Black women. my own personal stories line up with that. I've literally not been fed after I asked questions in the hospital. The little things of we're just not going to feed her dinner.
Yo, but how many of these doctors have these little BLM stickers in their car to go and virtue signal too? There's probably a whole bunch of that shit that's happening also, which is
because bias does live in our unconscious.
But you don't think that this movement, this movement's kind of getting a little bit diluted, and it's being diluted on purpose?
I'm sure it's being diluted on purpose. I don't think that means that any of it's nullified.
Sure, but I think that generally speaking, I think that the biggest I had this discussion with Tim Crowder, this ex-NFL player, about this, and I feel like the biggest racists are, A, the people that you don't see, and B, the people that are the corporate CEOs, the career politicians, the heads of multinational news media corporations, because everything that they seem to be putting out is designed to create outrage instead of create understanding, and only a racist would want to do that.
Well, they're ultimately paying attention to bottom lines and trying to get numbers. So.
But you understand what I'm saying, though, right?
Yeah, I understand completely. I think is their goal to hurt Black people? No, their goal is to make money.
Yeah, but the goal is also to create tension, because the more people have tension with one another, the less likely what happened with Wall Street bets is to occur. The less likely people are to pay attention to Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. The less likely people are to pay attention to Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, which is on, September 26th. So mark that on your calendar. So if another mass shooting or another racial thing happens within that time frame, just know, what's going on, right?
Absolutely.
That's my attitude about it. Obviously racism is bad, and you can't discount what people go through, but it's you don't want to accidentally be doing the bidding of hedge funds and corporate CEOs and these heads of multinational news corporations, because the more you talk about that, you start talking about that constantly while this Wall Street bet stuff is going on, or while this Jeffrey Epstein thing is happening, right? You're hampering your own freedoms, right? And this is for everybody.
Yeah, I agree with
You know
that.
what I mean? That's my take on it, right? And
yeah, I just think that it's easy to assume that it's not that financial literacy or freedom is going to alleviate the problems, because it simply doesn't.
No, but nothing can but I don't think anything can alleviate any of these problems. These things just are a shitty fucking situation that happens.
I disagree. I think there are still nurses out there who learned that Black people's skin is thicker and will refuse to give me a smaller needle, though I will tell them my veins collapse and so I need a baby gauge needle, and they'll go, oh no, this one will work just fine, and I'll say that's not the one I need.
Let me ask you a question,
because
I see a lot of the shit that you post on social media.
Uh-huh.
And it's it's such a big, there's so big general concepts, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you share individual stuff like that? Because that will get more people to be empathetic and understanding of that struggle, right?
Well, so I think I'm speaking in a vacuum, right? So what I share, other than maybe you, Alex, and maybe 3 or 4 people, I'm sort of speaking in general terms to the people that I know and love, 2,000 people on my Instagram. I do share a lot of those personal stories. I talk on a lot of panels.
I'm saying like when I see you on social media, I see your stories. I'm just like, oh damn, you got to share that, like, because that would be like what you're saying right now. Share that. I'll share it and I'll be like, yo, this is what people are going through. Like these are because you got to personalize and sell these issues because the way it's being done right now with all this, the way like all this woke shit's being put out, especially with the pandemic and the lockdowns and how it all coincided. All this is happening is this is just becoming a giant alt-right recruitment ad. And you don't want that to be the case. Like I don't want.
Yeah, but that's not my job. If somebody's headspace is that they are going to, if they're apt to fall into the alt-right, they're not my audience. I can't save them.
But you can like no.
I leave them for you.
No,
Alex.
but I think that if you speak to people in a certain way, like a lot of people gravitate towards these movements because there's like a lack of empathy and there's a lack of understanding, and I think that when people when you can make a situation relatable, you save that from happening. Like that a lot of people in 1981 when Bernie Sanders got elected mayor of Burlington, Vermont, a large majority of the people that voted for Bernie Sanders voted for Ronald Reagan also.
I'm sure.
You know what I mean? So like there's ways to sell this stuff, and it's people are doing a horrible job.
But I think
of
you
selling
can't make
this
that.
message.
I think you can't make that the job of black people. So like to me, that's not my
this
job.
This is the job of humanity. It's everybody's job. I should do it too.
But you're Jewish. You shouldn't have to do a lot of the work either. For me,
I don't do that much work. I talk shit in a pedicab, and I ride around with the Captain America mask on, telling people to get in. We're fighting socialism. Like I don't do all that much. Like I do very little.
But you do more than most people.
Which is sad.
Exactly. But so for me, I need to talk to people who are interested in being allies, and they need to talk to their cousins. They need to talk to their family. There's a lot of my friends and a lot of people that are not going home for Thanksgiving because it's going to be hard, and it might be their hardest Thanksgiving. Go home and do that work because they're scared of having those tough conversations with Uncle Bill or with whoever it was.
Man, they're trying to cancel Thanksgiving because we're about to start talking about Jeffrey Epstein and all this other shit too. It's like, I mean, that's also a difficult conversation too to talk about, like Bill Gates hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and we're taking public health advice from some nerd who is fucking buddy with a pedophile. Like that's also something that's also a tough conversation that we got to talk about.
Agreed.
I think there's a lot of parallels. I think there's a lot of parallels with that stuff, right?
There's a lot of buzz out here.
There's so many. I know. So I'm sorry.
I just got distracted by him.
You know what? So you know what this whole what my concern about this critical race theory stuff is?
What's that?
Right? Because I think like what you're saying is like I can't like argue the validity of what you're going through, right? Like because that's just being a dick, right? If you're arguing like the validity of like what
Alex.
another human being is going
through. You do like me.
I always liked you. No, listen. I don't want to like argue like the validity of like what you're going through and whatnot, right? Because that's stupid and it's counterproductive and it's not what this is about.
And I should also say I'll say it in a minute. Sorry, I'll remember critical race. No, I also usually present because I'm a person that speaks up and says, and I always also present. I don't know if this is because of race, but I'd love for you to explain what you do think it is. I had a luxury vehicle from a dealership here in Austin. My brother-in-law used to run the dealership in Fort Worth, so I knew what their standards were from the company. So I'd been to the Fort Worth and the Dallas locations lots of times. I knew what their standards of care were, how they cared for people. I went here. I showed up in my car. Clearly, I have bought one of these cars before.
And they thought it was stolen, or they were like...
No, 4 different times I couldn't get help. I sat outside. I sat in my car. Nobody comes out. Nobody comes to the bay. Nobody says hello. I walk in. Hello. I had an appointment. Oh, sorry. We're just choosing what we're going to eat for lunch. I don't care. I've been sitting in my car for 15 minutes. They're literally supposed to come out and say hello. Or, hey, I'm getting some work done on my car. I'd love to test drive the new one so that I can just trade it in and buy a car. It's real easy to sell me a car, P.S.
Interesting.
real easy, because I already have my mind made up and I know that financing isn't going to be a big deal. I just want to drive it, see if I like it, do the paperwork. I'll come back at 2:00 tomorrow. I literally on 4 different occasions couldn't get help and finally just wrote an email to the general manager and I was like, listen, here's a picture of me. You decide why I've not been able to consistently get help in your dealership, because I know what your standards of care are for customers in other cities, and I know that this is not how you treat customers. And his response was, I think that it's due to race. And he pulled his entire staff in at 7 a.m. the next morning to have a conversation with them.
Well, good for him. Good on him.
Yeah.
Good on him for recognizing it, right? Like
absolutely. Like, good for him for recognizing it. And he, as a business owner, needs to then make a stand that this will not happen in my business.
But you don't need to have them take some crazy course. You just have a discussion. No, you say, hey, listen, don't do this shit again or you're fired. No. And that's literally the 10-minute discussion, and that's...
No, because the thing is that if there's a part of you that takes issue with race, then there might be a part of you that takes issue with people who are trans.
Well, okay, so if you see a trans person coming in, you're not going to want to serve them.
People get uncomfortable and don't know how to act. Not everybody's you, Alex.
Sure. Okay.
Not everybody is you. And I remember being in retail and somebody going, is that a man or is that a woman? It doesn't matter. Sell them lip gloss. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It literally doesn't matter.
But some people need to be trained because you
then there's also all this shit.
Hope everybody's
Did you see
the
new
level.
like Frosted Flakes ad where they're like having like pronouns and all types of like
good.
I don't know though. For little like when I was a little kid, I didn't understand any of that stuff. Like that was beyond like
it's
I feel like this stuff
them.
is being done to just create confusion in people's identity. Is what I think it's what I think there's
Here's
a
what I
deliberate
think
agenda
you
to do.
I think you have to know is that everybody deserves to feel comfortable in their own skin. For my children have an aunt and an uncle that are both gay, and they have an aunt that is straight.
Cool.
So. But they need to know that that's normalized.
But all you got to do is say in your house, hey, there's nothing, whatever. They love each other, and this is what it is. What's the big deal? That's it.
Because I've already had my kids come home and go, so-and-so said that 2 girls can't get married. And I'm like, yes, they can. Yes, they can by law. And yes, they can in our family. And you have 2 aunts. You have an Auntie Lisa. You have an Auntie Katie. And they're your aunts, and they're married, and they love each other, and they're partners for their whole lives.
Cool. And that conversation took 2 minutes, and then now they know.
But they know, but it still requires, because it is because it's not the norm that they see everywhere, it still requires constant talking about for my children, who I think are smart. Because people are still dismantling these things in their mind.
I think people have gotten a lot more tolerant in this generation.
A lot of people, but not
But I think
everybody.
that the more you push this, I'm worried that the backlash from this can just make people go backwards into like the way that people thought in like the 1950s and 40s, and I feel like there's almost this agenda to do that with the way everything's being pushed.
I disagree.
I don't know. Okay, I guess we'll agree.
I think you.
Did you see the CIA commercial?
Yes.
It's like it's like, listen, if the CIA is pushing this, right, then you know that this is like literally what you're doing, the bidding of the corporate establishment by doing this. Like the CIA is not pushing this because they care about diversity and inclusion.
I think they do. I think that they care about
the people that torture Muslims and dissidents in Guantanamo Bay care about diversity and inclusion. Like
they care about their agents.
We need a BIPOC woman now doing the torturing. Is that what it's like?
I think they care about having the people on their team feel well represented and feel empowered, and to feel, because ultimately, if people feel comfortable in the space in which they work, it saves the company money because they stay. You don't have to keep hiring new people, because when you have to code switch all the time...
Yeah, it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
I get that.
All the time. And if you're constantly not sure if it's a safe space to talk about your life...
But it's the CIA, Tario. It's the fucking...
It doesn't
the same
matter.
people that funded the Contras and helped sell crack into the black communities are now talking about pronouns and making...
But when was that? So they don't get to evolve as an organization?
Sure, but you got to understand the skepticism when that stuff comes out.
I understand the skepticism when it comes out, but I'm also saying, like, if they're doing, if somebody's taking the first step to evolution, and what we're doing is then critiquing it. Oh.
Sure. I understand all that stuff.
Do we need to wait?
Yeah, well, we're wrapping up in like 5 minutes, right?
Okay.
Maybe 2 minutes. All right. Okay.
Chucky. Charles.
Come on.
Charlie.
All right. Well, like, what was I saying about this? All right.
CIA.
Here's my problem with this critical race theory stuff, right?
Yes.
And it's that just looking at COVID and looking at the media and looking at the social media algorithms. One thing I learned from this year, and a lot of people learned, is that you should not trust the media and you should not trust the tech companies as far as you can throw them. So basically, anything that these people are promoting in mass, right, and using algorithms to promote and talk about is something that you should take with extreme amounts of skepticism. And I was listening to some lectures about this critical race theory stuff, and it's like, and when you're saying, hey, America, we got to look at American society and how it's completely founded upon the institutions of racism, I can see a lot of teachers who are not really well-educated, well-versed, well-rounded people. There's a complete echo chamber of thought in these schools, and you can start teaching a whole bunch of kids inadvertently, or maybe it's by design, who knows, not through the teacher's fault, but through people trying to promote this shit, to like start hating America. And that's dangerous, considering that you have like countries like China and Russia that want to become the #1 global superpower. And when you saw what was happening with COVID, like you had people in Canada, like you had cops arresting people and giving people fines for shaking hands. Like,
but
you
I
do
think
not want that shit to happen in America. And you gotta like, I'm sorry if I'm going on a rant, but like,
you're on a rant.
You gotta, I know, you gotta do everything that's possible to like preserve like the American values of freedom, but you got to be careful with how it's being taught, right? Like,
part of freedom is like you also have to be true, or you're going to repeat.
But then
what you've
they don't
done.
even teach U.S. history in Texas schools. Why don't they just start with teaching U.S. history in the schools? Like I wanted to be a school teacher when I first moved here, right? And I was like subbing elementary school, and they didn't teach history until like middle school. Like, why don't they just teach actual history instead of like you teach actual history? But
that's the problem, is that they don't teach history in actuality. They don't teach the real what happened. Right now, the history that's taught is taught based
Columbus
on
sailed
books,
the ocean blue, and it's all a bunch of bull. Yeah,
not
I know
even
that. Yeah,
No, not even that. It's the books and history are taught based on the Daughters of the Confederacy, like romanticizing what happened in the Civil War and romanticizing slavery in so many ways.
Make the kids read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Make them do that, right? Like,
have
you read that book?
No, I haven't.
You gotta reread that. It's about John It's by.
I'll order it right after we leave here,
all right,
from a black bookstore. But
but okay.
But I mean, like, so I think critical race theory comes from the swing of the pendulum in the other direction, and there's a fear behind people learning that America wasn't always perfect. Well, I think you have to know what the truth of things are.
I think there's so much anti-Americanism that's being promoted right now in media that it's really dangerous.
Yeah, but how long is that going to last? And
I think that they're trying to make this a thing.
Are all children going to learn that? There's plenty of kids that are never going to learn that.
There's also plenty of school districts where everyone's within their echo chamber. Just because Austin's left, maybe you go to Odessa, it's right? Like there's all that stuff. But I think that it's something that people need to be very cognizant of.
Yeah, but so my black children knowing what they know about race, because I've taught them from the inception. So that's the other thing you have to recognize, is that like the children of people of color know the truth through the lens and the eyes of their parents. They then get to a space where the teacher's not allowed to talk about it. It doesn't come up, and they feel unseen, unheard.
Listen.
And they're then doing the job of educating in the classroom.
Okay, having subbed in like in AISD and in like Hayes and whatnot, right? Like, I've had people give me shit because I'm trying to like teach a curriculum based on facts or offer an alternative viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I had this one lady I was teaching special ed, right? And she was watching the Roger Stone stuff that was going down in 2019. And she was talking about like how this all this WikiLeaks stuff and how they got to impeach Trump for like this WikiLeaks and all this shit. And I'm just like, well, why is that a problem when you're leaking emails to the general public that are on record?
Exactly.
And she walked out of the classroom in a huff, furious at me because I asked that question.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, you don't want those people teaching.
Exactly.
You don't want those people teaching kids either. And that's fucking scary.
I agree. And that's the thing, is that if you agree that critical race theory might not be good in the hands of a lot of teachers and people who are educators, you have to recognize that removing all of that and putting whatever else.
Okay, then you got to remove all these shitty teachers, and you got to create new standards to be a teacher. And until you start creating new standards, like, hey, you've had to have had a job that doesn't involve being in school for 5 years before you can become a teacher. Do that. Then maybe the game plan changes. Hey, you need to have diversity of thought in major city public schools, so you see the Democrat and the conservative perspective.
I agree.
Do that. Like, if I were teaching right now, and I was talking about how this prolonged mask wearing is bullshit, and how and it criticized lockdowns and did all that stuff, or even said that the BLM protests with how they were could have possibly been a super spreader event, I probably would have been fired or canceled.
Absolutely.
So it's like, well, then you should allow me to state those claims, if I can do it with facts or have that open discussion.
Or if you can do it with both sides of the coin.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
until you do that, they shouldn't be teaching this critical race. They got to make sure that you have both sides of the coin presented before you do that, is my perspective, right?
I understand that that's your perspective. I will
Okay,
not
all
agree
right.
with you.
All right. Anyway, Tauri, thank you so much. There's so much other shit I wanted to talk about.
I know.
But I guess,
We'll talk
Charlie's
again
got to
soon.
go. We'll come back soon. We'll do this again. I know you got your thing you got to put me on, which never happened.
I
But
know.
anyway,
I got to get it going.
yeah, we got Coal Town co-owner Tauri Laws-Phillips, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.